The concept of stay-at-home girlfriends has entered the discourse recently. Because life can sometimes take you down some pretty weird paths, I actually spent a couple years living that life. Sort of. And it's an important sort of, so huge pin in that for later. This video is going to somewhat focus on my experience from those years and the ongoing consequences of leaving the workforce for a period of time, rather than tackling the discourse itself. Also, I'm going to say this at the outset before I even roll my name and all of that stuff, because there's a history of some people assuming what points I'm going to make because of my hair color. I'm not angry, I'm not triggered, I'm not looking to cancel anyone. Except for your credit card debt with today's sponsor. Nope. Just kidding. Just that was such a nice transition there into an ad read. I had to, even though there's no ad, no spawns. I had to. I'm making this video to share some anecdata for how things were for me as a stay-at-home partner, and now as a work-from-home, self-employed, what feels like D tier but Social Blade says B tier, edutainer, plus some general thoughts. I may not have corporate sponsors, but I do have my lovely patrons, PayPal pals, and merchers to thank for supporting me and this channel. So as always, a big thank you to y'all. And if you would like to join the super cool club and be cooler than the kitties' PJs, links are in the description. If you're new, hi, I'm Cass, and I was a housefrau for a couple years. I've talked about it at various points on this channel. The easiest to point to is my experience as a trailing spouse. And a trailing spouse is somebody who, in a couple, is moving for their partner who is moving for their job. But I'm getting ahead of myself. In case you aren't as present online, the stay-at-home girlfriend thing seems to be largely coming out of lady TikTokers who are taking on the domestic support role full-time.
This is everything I did for my boyfriend today as a stay-at-home girlfriend.
Welcome to the day in the life of a stay-at-home girlfriend.
A day in the life of an average for now looking stay-at-home for now girlfriend.
Seems like there's two categories of stay-at-home girlfriends. Those who have a more similar experience to what I did, where things are pretty low-key and actually staying at home, and those who seem to almost be more like a live-in monogamous sugar baby. Do with that observation what you will. In both cases, they're supported financially by their boyfriends. And I think there's two features that make this a distinct concept from stay-at-home moms. There's no kids, and they're not married. The discourse has centered on the inherent power imbalance in the relationship, concerns for the girlfriend's future if the couple breaks up, and the potential for abusive situations to develop, which would be really hard to escape. I think these are absolutely important things to talk about, so here we are. It is worth noting before getting into it that the prominent stay-at-home girlfriends, and that is a lot to be saying repeatedly throughout this video, so we're going to employ the hashtag they use, SAHGFs. So the prominent SAHGFs are content creators, and the SAHGF is part of their brand. Seems like the majority of this content is coming out of TikTok, which is notoriously bad for paying its content creators. So somebody doing the SAHGF life potentially has an ability to generate revenue, especially when they're able to secure sponsors. So, as pointed out by Tara Mooney, by making this content, they're breaking from the I'm not working vibe they're trying to sell viewers. But, a counterpoint I saw by one of these SAHGF creators in a TikTok I have absolutely zero chance of finding again at this point, was arguing that the social media business she was doing isn't mutually exclusive with the SAHGF lifestyle. It was important to her to maintain that social media business while being supported by her boyfriend. But enough talk of those beautiful young influencers. Let's talk about me, who is absolutely not at least one of those things. I am an elder millennial who married my high school sweetheart young. Like, we weren't old enough to buy the alcohol for the little after-wedding party ourselves. We got married in a judge's office with 2 weeks' notice to our parents. 10 out of 10 would absolutely do it again. We got married so that my husband could qualify for better financial aid. And at that point, it seemed like an inevitability that we were going to get married at some point, so may as well do it now, get it out of the way, and improve our financial situation. The point at which we got married, we had been dating for 4 years already. We are a 2 PhD couple. Mine is in cognitive psychology, his is in physics. And we lucked out in that we got to go to grad school in the same place. When that was winding down, we had a talk and decided we didn't want to do the long distance relationship thing. So we were going to go with whoever got the best offer, and the other person was just going to make it work. Much to my husband's somewhat joking disappointment, the best offer ended up going to him. He was disappointed because he wanted to do the house row thing instead of me, and honestly, he would be better at it, but anyways. And that is when I transitioned into being a trailing spouse. We moved for his postdoc, and then we moved for his paid-to-do science position twice. There's just going to be cat noise in the background. During his postdoc, I was able to adjunct, which is something. After that, we moved to a town in the middle of nowhere, oil and mining country, so my job options were Walmart or fast food. He was making enough for us to be comfortable, so I became the stay-at-home wife. My story has admittedly already deviated from the normal SAHGF path. By the time I exited the workforce, I was married and had a couple degrees under my belt. Marriage itself is a concept with a lot of things to criticize and analyze, but in this context, it buys me a degree of financial security and safety if the relationship falls apart. I'm not planning for the relationship to fail by acknowledging this. If anything, it sort of adds a layer of joint investment in the relationship. We both have financial incentives to keep the ship afloat, for better or worse. Also, with how healthcare works, at least in the US, are these women covered? Do they have health insurance? Since we left grad school, I've had my health insurance through my husband's benefits, because you can do that for a spouse. These SAHGFs might be being let out to dry. Although maybe they have enough money so it doesn't matter, but that would also be a good time to dump somebody. Sorry, honey, $1 million is too much. Bye. But back on that SAHGF deviation. By the time I stayed at home full time, my husband and I had been together for 16 years. That is a lot of shared history with a person, and I was able to trust him completely by that point. I don't know if I'd be able to have that same level of trust under a couple years. We'll talk about this later, but in total honesty, I don't know if having those degrees have unequivocally helped me post-domestic sabbatical. A fair bit of SAHGF content seems to focus on the daily life of.
It's another realistic day in the life of a stay-at-home girlfriend.
Welcome to the day in the life of a stay-at-home girlfriend.
Day in the life of an average, for now, looking stay-at-home, for now, girlfriend.
So let me tell you about my schedule during those years. I would typically wake up in the early afternoon, sometime between 1 and 3 p.m. That would give me enough time to wake up, have my breakfast, catch up on email, morning stuff. On work days, my husband would get home between 3 and 4, maybe 5 p.m. And depending on the day, we might go grocery shopping, go to the gym. We were going 4 times a week at this point, and it was the best shape I've ever been in my life. Go out and be social, stay in and play video games, coupley things. And we would do that stuff until it was time for Dr. Mr. the husband to go to bed, usually no later than 10 p.m. And at this point, we had an entire tuck-in routine that the cats even helped with. It was adorable. After that, I was left to my own devices. Literally, my own devices. I spent so much time playing video games on my Xbox. There are certain questions that you just don't ask. How old are you? When are you defending your thesis? How many hours have you played in Skyrim? I was in charge of the home chores, so laundry, dishes, bills, just the stuff that you do in a home. But I am that person and I get extra sneezy, so the husband gets to do the cat litter. If my husband wasn't having something pre-cooked that he would just nuke at work, I would throw together his lunch sometime between 3 and 5 a.m. He would wake up 4:30, have his little morning routine, and then I'd send him off to work a little bit after that. I generally didn't stay up too long after that. Sometimes we would even do almost like a little sleep shift change in the bed where I was coming into bed a little bit before he was leaving. And it was actually a nice little quality time moment, just a quick cuddle before parting ways. So all of that cycle, every day, for 3 years. It's not clear if this goes against the SAHGF ethos, but I did try to keep myself busy with self-improvement stuff that wasn't just gym-related during that time. I picked up an IT certificate, helped a friend try to launch a startup, tried to learn how to program apps and failed spectacularly, and even launched my first attempt at a YouTube channel right before the adpocalypse happened, so it kind of just petered out after that. So I was doing things to try to reduce the impact of the employment gap, even if they didn't amount to that many deliverables. This is absolutely going to be a problem of privilege, but when you have that much free time, you can go a bit stir-crazy if you don't find meaningful things to do. Part of why I started doing those other things is because, in my opinion and experience, you can only play so many video games. At a certain point, you saturate and it gets boring. I had to find something productive to do. Hopefully this is an unwarranted concern, but for people who adopt the SAG lifestyle hard enough, I worry that they don't have other things going on. I saw TikToks from some people where they talked about hobbies or projects unrelated to SAHGF maintenance, meaning things like Pilates. So people may already be diversifying their life and identity already. We were talking about it earlier this year and both agreed. Those years, despite living in a town that even the locals didn't want to live in a relatively shitty apartment, were some of the easiest and happiest of our relationship. Our finances were building into a place where we could start to absorb some bad surprises, which living in California has gradually chipped away at. My stress levels were pretty low, so my mental health was in a pretty good place, and due to the nature of his job at that point, he didn't have tons of stuff following him home from work. We could just enjoy our time together. It wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. There were some aspects of that job and location that definitely encouraged us to move on when it was time. The 4 a.m. wake-up call was not his choice. The job had very rigid hours for when he needed to be certain places and little flexibility to work around that, and that kind of constrained when we were doing things. He had a stupidly long commute that was unsafe. Like oil workers or semi-truck drivers pulling a 20-hour day and falling asleep behind the wheel while driving on the highway, or people just deciding, you know what, on this stupidly long drive home, I'm gonna knock back a couple beers and more beers and drive into and kill people. Levels of unsafe. Some of the tasks he had to do for his job were pretty scary, in my opinion. We had a rule where I wouldn't find out what he was doing that day on the off chance it was one of those days where he was doing a scary thing, so I wouldn't have just an anxiety-filled, sleepless day wondering if today is the day that heavy piece of machinery is going to crush, electrocute, asphyxiate, whatever, my husband to death. I was always relieved when he walked through the front door. Let's just say that. To add a little contextual wrinkle for why this was a fortuitous period of years for me, this is when my chronic pain healthcare adventures really started in earnest. Prior to this, my access to care was limited, either because I just didn't have health insurance, or because I couldn't get a doctor despite living in a place with socialized medicine. A couple of months into our time there, and I basically lucked into a good doctor who could be bothered to care and ask questions and follow up and do research and everything, and finally gave me a diagnosis for the nerve thing, which had been going on for 10 years at that point. Trigeminal neuralgia. And I have talked about that repeatedly on this channel, so I won't do it here, but just briefly, it is a really shitty, painful, unpredictable nerve pain. A benefit of not working in this period is I could just try medications for it and see how things went. And it's a good thing too, because the majority of them just destroyed my ability to function. If it wasn't kicking me into dissociating 24/7, I could get bad headaches, violent shakes, or even just the complete annihilation of my platelets. Bad times. But bad times I didn't have to take off sick for. I'll work through what I consider the positives and negatives and other thoughts on SAHGFing after we talk about the aftermath from those couple years. We knew my husband's job there was temporary. He was babysitting an experiment that was at the end of its life. When it was done and dusted, we were transferred to the employer's location in sunny Silicon Valley. With the opportunities for work where I could use my skills and knowledge theoretically open back up, and also having to contribute financially, I set to work applying. And applying. And applying. I was doing the things you're supposed to do. I was studying up on the places I was applying. I tailored my resume with the relevant skills, knowledge, and projects for each thing highlighted and very clear. I was reaching out to people through LinkedIn. I had people tear apart and revamp my resume when it wasn't working. Like, I did the things you're supposed to do to get the job. Well, this clearly isn't working. Now what? Well, Now what was my husband reaching out to basically all of his coworkers and collaboration to see if anybody had any leads for me. And that resulted in me talking to a recruiter at a tech company and an interview for a lab manager position. Both of these were ultimately dead ends. The tech job probably because I didn't have the industry knowledge to hit the ground running. Like, what's A/B testing? Had I ever done it? No. What is the price tag associated with your most valuable deliverable? As somebody who worked in academia, the lab manager position, I was a bit grateful when I was turned down for it because I like not being married to my job. About a month into the applying process, I also broadened my scope. What jobs are available? Let's apply. Because surely I can do something other than cognitive psychology. Right? Well, apparently the truism that I was told in grad school, that psych PhDs have no problem going into statistics jobs, is retired. It's so retired it's dead. Because these sorts of jobs, at least around these parts, want extensive programming experience. And pretty much any psych PhD that you're talking to is not going to have that. So, ignored the trained skills and broadened my search further. I applied for tutoring positions, tech support, administrative assistance, doggy daycare, just all over the place, and not a single response back. Well, that's clearly not working either. So, with my free time, figured out a way that I could use my skills and knowledge in a way that would benefit people, and ta-da! The edutainment YouTube channel you see before you right now. We're talking about this because the SAHGFers seem to generally believe that they'll have no trouble just slipping back into the workforce if or when they stop SAHGFing. My experience strongly says otherwise, but there are some caveats there. For one, I am living in the capitalist wet dream of an area. It's possible if I had applied at those same jobs in not Silicon Valley, I may have gotten them. That the apparent sin of not working for 3 years could be overlooked because of the perceived value of having a trained cognitive psychologist. Sure shit ain't happening here though. For two, I am technically skilled labor. Sort of. Social sciences are weird like that. At the more technically skilled job places, I was likely not making the cut because people without the gap and with newer experience, because holy shit did things change fast for 10 years, were also applying. They are perceived to be safer hires. For the less specialized jobs I was applying for, I was probably seen as a flight risk. From their perspective, why hire a PhD, spend the time, money, manpower training me in that job, only to have me leave as soon as a better job comes along? Assuming one does. No joke. My friend from grad school was told this by a Starbucks when she was having a rough job patch after moving. Don't get me wrong, I love the skills and knowledge and everything I got from the PhD process, but it has made the finding a job process more difficult. Third, sadly, is my age. It may be easier for somebody in their 20s to snag a job post-gap than somebody in their 30s or potentially even older. Finally, I love my data. Employment gaps have a consequence on the ability to find a job and the quality of pay down the road, especially if you're a woman. This is true for people leaving to do the kid thing or take time off to care for a sick loved one. Imagine the difficult conversation that's going to happen when you have to defend a gap for what's perceived to be nothing. Let's wrap this all together now. And just as a warning for the rest of this video, I'm going full elder mode. Like, just through sheer fact of being alive, probably twice as long as a lot of these people, I've had more life experiences under my belt than I did when I was in my 20s. I've had more life experiences, I've seen more shit, and so if I can pass some of that knowledge on and prevent some of the bad experiences from happening for people, I'm gonna try. I went into my stay-at-home stint with the mindset of it being a temporary thing. I did because it made sense for our situation at the time. Dr. Hubs had a physically demanding job that was paying the bills in a place where it was difficult for me to find work, so me just doing the housework made sense. I absolutely didn't do it to be submissive to my husband, which isn't an uncommon theme in some of the SAHGF TikToks. And that is a sticking point for a lot of the discourse, and rightfully so. To me, an ideal relationship is a partnership where both parties have an equal say in discussions and deciding things. And when this submission to your husband comes into play, it seems like that goes out the window. I worry that this SAHGF loses at least some of her power in the dynamic. And at least for some of the accounts, SAHGFing looks a bit like a hipper, shinier version of traditional wifery. And yes, I know we're talking about consenting adults deciding how to live their best lives. It's their choice to make. That relationship structure seems to be an easier setup for the girlfriend to get stuck and unable to leave, or coerced into doing things she doesn't want. I can speak to some stigma these women are probably already being hit with, that what they're doing is selfish and narcissistic, and the easy way to fix that is to be a parent. I sometimes still get this now that I'm back to working, although that's probably from the perception that doing this is super easy, so I may as well also be raising some kids in the background. Until we're at the point where the species is dying because not enough babies are happening, it's nobody's responsibility to have a baby, especially if they don't want to. Like, for the couples who absolutely would have babies if they could financially afford it, let's get the UBI thing going, please. But for people who don't want kids, no. Especially no if the person is arguing that we need to produce more babies because otherwise the economy tanks. Fuck capitalism and fuck those people trying to use our bodies to sustain a workforce. The kid choice should be made out of care and love, not because the use of a person's time is deemed to be inappropriate, which brings me to the next point. I don't think this idea is quite as prevalent as it was during my formative years, as I was raised in the 90s, where feminism meant that not only were women working, but they were kicking down doors and smashing glass ceilings. Smash. Which, one, sets up an unrealistic idea for how much anybody can actually accomplish in most jobs, but also has an inverse idea woven into it. That a woman who isn't working is failing her gender and not working towards a more egalitarian society. This was a feeling I struggled with during my unemployed years, and I can damn near guarantee that this criticism is being launched at these women online, and it's fucking bullshit. Raising concerns about their ability to survive in the future, worrying about the power dynamic in these relationships, all of that, fair game. But telling someone that they're failing feminism or women by not working, quit it. Until not married partnerships get the same legal protections as married ones, I think the concerns about financial safety nets and future ability to take care of oneself after an employment gap are valid. Discounting or dismissing the possibility of the SAHGF ending is willfully ignoring the curb-stomping life could have waiting for you down the road if you don't take steps to protect yourself now. The gifts the boyfriend's giving the girlfriend could potentially be taken away if they break up. Ladies, get your bag in writing if you can. Like, are these gifts just gifts, or are they actual transfers of property? Who does this stuff belong to at the end of the day? Keep an independent bank account and credit line, and if this is a deal breaker for the boyfriend, get the fuck out of there. No questions, no discussion, just get. Oh, and healthcare. Socialized medicine would help with this here, although it's kind of complicated because my experiences with socialized medicine, it was tied up in my husband's work, but maybe that was just because we weren't citizens, I don't know. But socialized medicine and UBI, come on. If you're thinking about transitioning to the always-on vacation life, please do so only after you really know the person. Like, see them in a bunch of different situations and circumstances, possibly on like a road trip or vacation or something, because that's always going to bring out the worst in people. Do they treat you the same in public as they do privately? Do you ever get a feeling in your gut that something's not quite right, or has that feeling not come up? These are things to think about and do. Hopefully they'll help prevent getting into an abusive relationship, but it's certainly not guaranteed. Establish expectations and boundaries before you commit to anything. This is true for most relationships, but doubly so if you're going to become dependent on someone. Stuff like, what's the chore allotment going to be? How are bills, purchases, and other financial decisions going to happen? Are there any asks that you would be uncomfortable with, and are those ever going to be on the table? What happens if one or both of you want to change roles? What if the girlfriend wants to get back to working? What if the boyfriend wants to take some time off work? How is that going to be received and handled? If down the road somebody wants to get married, is that a deal breaker for the other person? Overall, my years as a stay-at-home wife were good for me and my husband. The different factors were in a balanced sweet spot where we just got to enjoy each other. But it hasn't been without its consequences. Don't get me wrong, I am passionate about my YouTube channel and the stuff I do here. but it can be really hard to shake that nagging little voice that this isn't a real job, that nobody would hire me. I have forbidden myself from doing the math of what my hourly rate works out to be based on what I pull in monthly, and again, thank you so much for that, versus how long it takes me to make each video, and let's just say I'm not in this for the money. Granted, I'm in a pretty niche corner of YouTube, so if I wanted to, I could go Mr. Beast mode and probably grow the channel a lot faster, but then I wouldn't be making content I care about. I was not hired by anybody. Granted, I didn't go out and put in applications at the retail stores near me, so I don't know if I would have been perceived as a flight risk or if I could have gotten a job there. But at this point, especially after the pandemic, I can't really do those types of jobs. Wearing a mask sets off my nerve things, so any job that has a masking requirement, I'm out. Realistically, I would also likely accumulate sick days more rapidly than most companies would probably be happy with because of how unpredictable and inconvenient it can be with timing of the more intense nerve flares. Or symptoms flaring up from this other mystery thing that's just wrong with me. Because you know how companies love their employees to just take off sick. However, I am not the primary breadwinner in this relationship. I don't even know if I'd call my contribution enough to be secondary. What I make is more like the chips and salsa you get before eating the main course that is my husband's salary. This is absolutely a carryover from my time as a housefrau, and one I'm incredibly grateful for. It is absolutely, undeniably a luxury that I don't have to work through that pain unless I choose to, because I apparently have a bit of a sadistic streak. This should be true for fucking everybody, which would also have the added benefit of making it easier for SAHGs to leave from home if the relationship turns sour. Removing ourselves from that little tangent, I don't inherently hate the concept or despise the people doing it. As long as everybody involved is a consenting adult making informed choices, have at. SAHGF away. And hopefully I have provided a little more info for making those sorts of decisions. Until next time, bye.